Hello and welcome to another episode of the Immigrate Canada CIC News podcast. My name is Monty, and as regular listeners will know, I've spent the last 25 years promoting Canadian immigration all around the world. And I'm here to spread the message that immigrating to Canada is actually pretty easy and very straightforward as long as you have the right information. This is why I made a best-selling guide called Canada Made Simple. It's available all around the world through Barnes & Noble, Amazon and all great booksellers at less than $30. I can absolutely say this is going to be the best $30 you're going to spend in this entire expensive process. You're going to find out exactly how to make your own application straight from the experts. You're going to save literally thousands on so-called migration agents and lawyers' fees, and even if you are planning on using an agent or a lawyer, then find out about the process in detail so you can ask them the right questions at the right times and make sure that your agent is on point. There's also a ton of things you can do yourself to save loads of money on lawyers' fees and to help speed up the process. I cover all aspects of moving to Canada, such as express entry, federal skilled worker, federal skilled trades, Canada Experience Class, work permits, spouse visas, student visas, and troubleshooting an application. And before we move on, you can find out more at canadamadesimple.com. Today we're going to talk about IELTS and some of the urban legends and myths that have sprung up around the IELTS exam or the IELTS English test in recent years. And obviously, as far as Canadian immigration is concerned, or indeed moving to Canada generally, the IELTS test is a very important part of the journey. And whether this is to get into university or college, to secure employment, or indeed to immigrate to Canada via one of the express entry pathways, and certainly lots of other different pathways as well. And it's important not to let incorrect information scare you or certainly cause panic on or before the test day. But with that said, IELTS is an exam which demands respect. And by that, I mean study for it. Okay? There are hundreds, if not thousands, of guides and practice tests available on Amazon. There are myriad IELTS preparation centres all around the world. So, don't just rock up on the day and expect it to be fine. And this is especially true of native English speakers as well as non-native English speakers. In fact, when it comes to people who have English as a first language, there tends to be some kind of general malaise that sets in when they're approaching the test. And it's this malaise that often results in a less than satisfactory mark. There's an expectation that, hey, I have English as my first language. There's an arrogance as to, some people have an arrogance and think that, hey, why should I be tested because, I speak English as a first language. And other people are like, well, it's going to be fine. I use English every day. Hey, I'm off to be tested on, speaking the English language. I'm going to be absolutely fine. And then they get there and they find out that actually it's a really tough exam. And the first thing they do is panic when they realise that they've walked into an examination centre or an examination environment completely, totally unprepared for the task ahead. So simply don't let that happen to you. Study, revise, set aside some time every day. Go through past papers. If they're identifying any areas that you need to address or any areas of concern, then do reach out to an IELTS practice centre or for some IELTS tuition. It really is worth it in the long run. And the other thing about turning up to exams or an exam centre, regardless of whether you have English as a first language or not, it is an exam environment, and I do think that sometimes this unsettles people, especially if they haven't maybe done a formal exam for quite some time. Maybe they left school or university a number of years ago and really haven't been in that exam environment since. And so, when they walk in there and they see that it's invigilated and there's all this formalities around where you sit and what you're allowed on your desk, people do tend to panic. And so what we want to do here is really debunk some of the myths around IELTS, because It is still a very popular test, especially with regards to Canadian immigration. And indeed, in terms of studying in Canada, IELTS is the only English test accepted by the IRCC for international students who are looking to come to Canada under the Student Direct scheme. But do always check with your Canadian educational institution where you intend to study to make sure that they accept IELTS. And if you are looking for a lot more breakdown in terms of IELTS, in terms of point score, in terms of the CLB, do head over to my website, CanadaMadeSimple.com, where you're going to find tons of good, useful, technical and free information on IELTS and Canadian immigration generally. So without further ado, number one, lots of people will say to me, hey Monty, IELTS is just simply harder than some of the other tests such as TOEFL or PTE or any of the others. And I have to disagree with this. There's no easier test to take, or there's simply no easier option. And Canadian immigration is ultimately set at governmental level, as it is all around the world. And we cannot think really for one moment that a government is going to allow an easier test to be taken, especially when it comes to awarding permanent residency and ultimately citizenship in that country. So IELTS, as well as all the others, are held to exacting standards, and I personally do not believe that IELTS is any harder than any of the other tests. Okay, the second myth around IELTS and Canadian immigration is that it's impossible to get a high band score in IELTS. And this is simply not true. I've spoken with and seen the IELTS results score of, over the last 25 years, probably, certainly more recently over the last 10 years, in excess of 30,000 IELTS certificates, and I can say absolutely hand on heart that it's not impossible to get a high band score, certainly over 7s, 8s, 9s. I see them and have seen them day in, day out for many, many years. It is untrue that it's impossible to get a high band score in IELTS. It comes down to the preparation that an individual is willing to put in. Also, do bear in mind that a high band score of 8s and above may not actually be necessary. Obviously, it's always desired. The higher the band score, the more desirable it is when it comes to Canadian immigration, and that's true right across the board. Although, for some occupations through express entry, in terms of, especially in terms of the federal skilled trades, then the IELTS, the minimum IELTS requirement is a lot lower than having to go for those 8s, 7s, 8s and above. But as I say, you should always be looking to score the best you possibly can on every single module. Okay, there's another myth that I've heard, and people have said that you can't take IELTS more than once. This is absolutely untrue. Absolutely untrue. You can take IELTS as many times as required. So that one's pretty easy and quick to debunk. You should write more than the specified word limit on IELTS on your writing. I've heard this from time to time, and while there's a word limit that must be reached, because you lose marks if you don't hit the minimum, but going over doesn't necessarily result in extra marks. It should simply be answered correctly and to the best of your ability. So the minimum word counts are, task 1 is 150 words and task 2 is 250 words. Make sure you hit these minimums, make sure you use the key points, use correct grammar and a wide range of vocabulary. Don't start writing 700 words, 800 words, 1,000 words. Just don't. Okay, another myth. Some people think that they will lose marks if they don't speak with a British, American or indeed Australian accent. The IELTS examiners that I've known and spoken with over the years are very, very fair examiners. It's simply not true. There is no discrimination in there. And if you feel that there is some discrimination, there are ways to raise this directly with IELTS as well. However, what you do have to do is be focused and be alert and try and relax as much as possible. So speaking clearly, try and articulate yourself as clearly as possible. If for some reason you're not quite certain of a question that's been asked, do not hesitate for them to do not hesitate to ask them to repeat the word or to repeat the question. You're allowed to ask this, and don't worry about being marked down for it. It's absolutely critical that you understand what's being asked of you before you answer it in a clear and defined manner. Okay, some people think that when it comes to Canadian immigration, IELTS tends to mark you harder on the first test, so that you have to retake the test. My knowledge of IELTS, as I say, over many years, that there's certainly no truth in this. Although do remember that IELTS is a business, as is lots and lots of other elements of the Canadian immigration process. However, my knowledge of IELTS, I can personally say hand on heart, I do not believe that there is any truth or credibility that IELTS marks you harder on your first test, so you have to retake the test. And of course, we do have to remember that examiners are certainly not aware if this is your first test or your second test, and therefore they have no bias against your test. Unless, of course, you decide to tell them or reveal that this is indeed your first test. And maybe if it is your first test, if you were worried about this particular myth, then there's no harm in saying to the examiner that this is your third test, for example, or your fourth test, if you were worried about this being a particular issue. But obviously this is completely up to you and not a recommendation in any way. Simply something to think about if you were indeed worried whether IELTS marks you harder on the first test, so you don't have to retake the test. Other people say to me, hey Monty, I think the speaking test is biased as it's marked by humans. Well, no. The reason that it's marked by a human examiner on the speaking element is that it's a true indication of how you interact in the real world. The IELTS speaking test is designed to prepare you for some of the conversations that you will potentially have in your future, and the IELTS examiners are not biased towards test takers, and they will assess everyone equally on their ability to communicate clearly and articulately. And of course, other tests or other English tests rely on AI, artificial intelligence, and software in their speaking test. And I think this is where the major disparity lies between the IELTS test and the other tests. IELTS speaking is administered by and marked by humans, and other tests are administered and marked by AI and software. So really, it's not my role to sit here and advise you on one or the other. I think it's a very personal choice as to which English test you take, if indeed you do have an alternative to IELTS. So some people go with IELTS first, and then they're surprised and they score the results that they need because they practiced for it. Other people will maybe not get the results that they quite want, and other people find that actually using the AI route is better, or certainly gives them better results. I mean, personally, I would opt for being certainly assessed by a human, but other people may opt to be or prefer to be assessed by AI or indeed software. So other people want to know whether making the examiner laugh in the speaking tests means that they'll get a better result, being jovial or cracking a joke with the examiner. Just be yourself, please. If you're nervous, say that you're nervous. Be polite, be courteous, be friendly, as you probably are in all of your other, day-to-day social and business interactions. And do remember, the IELTS speaking examiner for Canadian immigration, actually they do want you to get the best possible score, and they are there to help you and to help facilitate the process, and certainly not intimidate you in any way. But if it doesn't feel natural to start cracking jokes, please, please don't. Okay, other people think that practicing with on official IELTS preparation will help you to get a higher score. Well, there are many, as I said before, there are many thousands of practice papers and practice guides available, all around the world, online and offline. There are IELTS training centres and there are IELTS tutors everywhere these days. One of the things, obviously, that I would recommend doing if you are going for the IELTS for Canadian immigration is to, do as many past papers as you can. Past papers every day. Just keep doing them, because at the end of the day, there's only, they're trying to mark on certain specific elements and use of an application of the English language. So there's only so many questions they can ask in so many different ways. So by going through the past papers, you get an understanding of and a feeling of the types of questions they ask and the types and structures of answers that they're looking for. So absolutely keep doing them, as many as you can. And obviously the same goes for any other exams that you're doing. Simply apply the same study methods as you did for other exams into the IELTS. There's another myth that certain IELTS test centres are easier or grade easier, and I simply don't believe this. It's as far as I'm concerned, and in my experience, it's untrue. Other people want to know whether computer-based tests are more difficult than the written version of tests. And again, this needs to be debunked, because the content and questions in IELTS on the computer and on the written paper are the same. Therefore, quite simply, one is not easier than the other. And it's completely down to you. You have the option whether you want to type on a computer or take the paper test. IELTS now provides both options to test takers, and this ensures that they have the options to really suit and cover everyone's needs. And the final one, again, back to what I covered at the start. Some people believe that, and I did sigh there, because it does result in many people having to retake the test. Because somebody has English as a first language, they feel that studying is unnecessary, and this is something that I would really caution against. In the nicest possible way. Do study, do prepare, do get yourself into that zone of practicing past papers. For many, this IELTS is really the biggest gateway that stands between them and their immigration dream. So if you look into Canada, you've thought about it obviously for many years, and you've embarked on the process, and you're going through it, and you're investing your time and your energy into making a successful application, because you know that Canada is where you want to be in life, and this pesky exam seems to be standing in its way. So do give it your all, give it everything that you've got in the tank. Study for it, get help as and where you can, go through past papers, and more often than not, if you put in the right preparation, you will get the right result at the end of the day. And as I say, for more information on IELTS as part of Canadian immigration, do head over to my website, CanadaMadeSimple.com. We've got lots of information on the website, and we've also put together a best-selling guide on how to make a successful Canadian application from start to finish. So it's a real walkthrough, and that's available at all great booksellers for less than $30. So that's certainly well worth checking out. But yep, good luck with everything, and remember, when it comes to IELTS, preparation is everything.